Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Nancy Skipton. I'm the Executive Director for Kent International Festivals, and you are about to watch another cultural story from our Cultural Stories series. We have a very special guest today, but before we get to our special guest, I just want to mention that we now have a sponsor for Cultural Stories, and that is Humanities Washington. They fund different cultural programs, historical programs, for a variety of reasons, and they've been a sponsor of the Kent International Festival. So I just want to make a very big welcome to them for being our sponsor. Now I'd like to welcome onto our screen Zenovia Harris. Zenovia Harris is the current CEO of the Kent Chamber of Commerce. She also is the person who started the Kent Chamber's first DEI committee. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's bring Zenovia on. Hi, Zenovia.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Yeah, same here. I love this StreamYard thing. I'm so excited to use it myself.
It's great. We can put beautiful screens, banners, all kinds of things. We really like it. It's been good for us at Kent International Festival. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be the CEO for the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, so it was really, Nancy, it was a fluke. I actually saw the job posting in a newsletter. Prior to becoming the CEO of the Chamber, I was a member of the Chamber through my work with the University of Phoenix. And I received the newsletter, and it's one of those things, you see it. And at the time, I was in a management position, and I saw it, and it said CEO. And immediately, I'm like, oh, you can't jump from manager to CEO. There has to be steps, right? There has to be a director level or something. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to do it. But any job applicant and any good steward should do research on the company. And so I researched the chamber, but then I researched the industry because I wasn't familiar with what a CEO for a chamber really does. We all know from job descriptions, it's probably not what it says in the job description, it's more. So what I did, because I was intimidated by applying, I actually reached out to what I call my personal board of directors, people that encourage me throughout the years to go for different jobs and educate me on different industries. And I just talked to people and said, what do you think about this? Do you think I should do it? And sure enough, it was in line with my personal mission. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. So that was a great part of it, that I get to interact with entrepreneurs and help them move their business from making no money to making a lot of money. And then I have a passion for the youth, and I have a passion for DEI, and all of those things I can do through the work of the chamber, not just for myself in a small organization, but this entire Kent community. So the opportunity presented itself in a newsletter, and I did some research, and I tried, and it worked out for me.
Yeah, it's been great. We love having you as the CEO.
Thank
Am
you.
I correct that you are the first Black CEO for the Kent Chamber, as well as currently the only Black CEO in the state of Washington for a non-ethnic chamber? Is that the case?
That is the case. That is the case. I'm looking for evidence otherwise, but that is the case. And so for the Kent Chamber, so my predecessor was here for 10 years. And then prior to that, so this is a relationship or a role that someone stays in for a significant amount of time. So I do like to preface it with that I don't think the chamber was actively not seeking someone of color, but I think it happened at a perfect time. It's important that leaders match the community in which they serve. And so me being an African-American woman, an entrepreneur, that was a great fit for this particular community, being such a multicultural community.
Yeah, I think so too, because one of the great things about Kent is that the city of Kent, the Kent City Chamber, the Chamber of Commerce, although they're not all related, they're all in the same city, and they really are starting to reflect the people that they represent. So I think that's really wonderful. Why did you start a DEI committee for the Kent Chamber? I know there's a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there were reasons why you made the decision to bring in one of those committees.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with, there was an event that happened that made that happen, but I want to make sure that folks know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that I have been talking about for years. I am a certified diversity professional, so I've had training in San Francisco on how to have these hard conversations with organizations. When I started at the Chamber, the first thing I wanted to do was talk about equity as it relates to businesses. And it was just small, medium, and large. And then as time went on, I thought, okay, there's a better way to have this conversation. And then in July of 2020, we were in the pandemic and we were all online, and we were hosting an event online, and the Chamber was Zoom bombed. And it was probably the worst day at work ever. And it was definitely one of the worst days of my lives. And I'll tell you, it was because I obviously have lived in a bubble, thank God, where I have never been called the N-word. I have never been really disrespected in that way. Some of the images that I and the folks on the call were subject to were things that I had never seen. Being a Black woman, I think the worst thing you can see is another Black woman being hung by her neck. And seeing that video and being in a place where I'm pretty quick on my feet. If you know me, I'm pretty quick on my feet. I could not move. I could not move. I could not change the screen. I froze. Right. And at that moment, after that was over, because we had to end the call, after that was over, I posted a video. I went live on Facebook and just talked about my experience. And at that moment, I realized it is important that the business community talk about the full spectrum of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that I had the right to be able to have these conversations and that they were necessary. So it took that action for me to feel comfortable to say, this is something that we're going to do. And I initially just wanted to meet with some of the folks that were on the call with me that day. And I wanted to meet with some of our larger organizations and say, did you know this happened to the Chamber? What could I have done? You know, let's talk about this. And from those conversations, I had over 60 or 70 people join me on Zoom to talk to me about that experience. And that's how the committee was born. And I allowed those people to join the committee and have their voice heard. And I think right now, Nancy, you're part of that committee. We are a diverse committee. We are committed to the conversations. But more importantly, I think this committee is committed to action. We don't want to talk about it. We want to be about it, and we want to set examples for our community. So I appreciate your work in that community. Yeah.
Yes, I'm so happy to be part of that committee representing Kent International Festival. Our missions are so similar in terms of treating all people with respect, regardless of where they're from, what they look like, what they do, what people think about them. It's so important to have those conversations and to bring things to that level. Many people use the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion interchangeably, and they really aren't. Would you give a couple examples of the differences between these terms, what each of these terms really truly mean?
Yeah. So, everyone, we can, get the definition for it, but it's better. I like to kind of paint a picture, right? So diversity on its head looks different and feels different. And the diversity, we're talking people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, religions, race, age, all of those things together make an organization, or let's say a committee, diverse, right? But what happens is, just because you are diverse and by face value, everyone looks different, if everyone has the same experiences, or let's say not everyone has the same weight, their voice doesn't hold the same weight. If you and I were on a committee together, that would be a diverse committee, right? But if every time Nancy says something, everyone says it's a great idea, but every time Zenovia says something, and even sometimes the same thing that Nancy says, they say it's not a good idea. That is not inclusive, meaning one person has more access than another, even though they're showing up to the same table. Then when you talk about same thing with equity, that's the same thing. It holds weight. We are both equitably have access to resources, time, energy of fill in the blank. And so you can be equitable, but you also could not be diverse. And so I've sat on committees where it's like, everyone is Black on the committee, and the person holding the meeting is not a person of color, and they want to get our perspective. Well, we need more than just Black people in the room to talk about the Black experience, because everyone is experiencing that. And let me clear that up real quick. When I say everyone is experiencing that, how I show up in a room, I have a reaction and an experience, but you, Nancy, have an action and an experience when someone like Zenovia shows up in the room. So they are not to be used interchangeably. Inclusion is more of a feeling, and diversity is more of a look. And equity is more of an access tool, right? So we all look different. Our voice all matters. And then we all have access to the same resources and opportunities. That's how I see DEI. And I always like to say you need a D.E.I.
I think that's a great way. That paints a really great picture of how to view those different terms. I know I've been guilty of using them somewhat interchangeably, like diversity and inclusion, and using them like they're the same word. And they're not.
Yeah.
As I am learning from you and others. How do you see the importance of cultural diversity in the city of Kent as it relates to building the business community and creating DEI among all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so there is no surprise, right? The Kent is 8th most ethnically diverse in the U.S. And really what that means is we have access to so many different cultures and people. And with culture, there is religion. So there are certain religion or cultures that practice a certain religion, right? And of course, they're interchangeable. But we have access to that. And I think if we recognize that, then we can all really come together. So there are different holidays, or, just this whole thing of like, oh, Christmas, it's Christmas time. Well, not everyone celebrates Christmas, right? So let's just get together for the holidays. So we're looking at that more what people call like PC ways of talking about things. But I think from a cultural standpoint, if we embrace all of the cultures, we will be better for it. And I like to say, so at our event that we had last week, you did a great job there. We allowed people to experience different cultures through food. There's a lot of ways to experience someone's culture. Food is one of those ways that I like to do it. And so that's one way that we can start celebrating one another, is not just me going to the soul food restaurant in the neighborhood. I want to go in and see what Maza Grill is doing. I want to go in and see what Thai chili is serving today. I want to go in and what's their cultural food. You learn a lot about people through their food, through their traditions. And I think if we as a community learn what those are, we can celebrate them louder in a better way. And we have this more, a better understanding of where people are coming from. So I think understanding that there is also cultural diversity is very important. And with the culture, religion changes, access changes, all of those things kind of come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know you've been part of the Kent International Festival as one of our guest MCs in the past. I remember one year you had like a gorgeous outfit on. I will never forget it. It was so beautiful.
Thank you.
From being part of the festival, how do you feel that our community's festival, the Kent International Festival, how does that help creating more inclusion for all of us, not just in the workplace, which is what more the chamber focuses on, is the workplace aspect, but also out in the community? How do you feel as being part of the festival, how do we contribute to that? What's your experience being there at one?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I remember that dress, and it was a designer, a local designer here, Ola Yinka. And if I can, I would post her website there. She does amazing work. I felt really beautiful that day. And I remember I was with like a jazz singer and we took a photo. I'm going to post the photo too now. But anywho, I think what the Kent International Festival does is it showcases out loud the different cultures. And so you feel like you find a home. So while there wasn't a booth, let's say an African American booth, I still found culture in the African booth, right? Because I just learned that I'm sub-Saharan African, 96% to be exact. And so just being able to embrace that culture, that's not something that I learned at home. I learned it through a DNA test. So something like the Kent International Festival allows me to see that culture and experience it without growing up that way. I think, another misnomer about the chamber is, yes, we are about business, but we are well aware that community is important for business. If your community is not doing okay, your businesses aren't doing okay. Your businesses are full of the people that live in the community, and the businesses need the community to shop local. They need the community to be healthy. And so you bring people together, and some people are hiding. They are hiding their culture. They are hiding their past, right? And they don't want to live out loud. And you guys provide an opportunity to do that. And on another note, though, I was never an MC. I think the Kent International Festival may have been my first major MC. Like, I've spoken in front of groups, which is different when you're MCing a live crowd, and you guys gave me that opportunity because I had a passion for diversity. And so I just want to take time to thank you guys for doing that. And that's another way of being inclusive, not just going to someone who's always a speaker, nothing against them, but they're always a speaker. They're always the MC. But you guys reach out into the community and get people that showcase who they are. Number one, you allow that. They are different. I am very different background and all of that. And then I wasn't experienced, and you gave me that experience. So you just create this well-rounded experience, immersed in different cultures in different ways. And we all know we learn differently. So the fact that you can watch a show or watch a dance, or you can go to a booth and have an experience, or you can eat food, or you bump into somebody you would have never bumped into before. That's the atmosphere that you guys create. And I just can't wait to be back in person and go to the next international festival.
We're hoping in 2022, fingers crossed, that everything calms down enough and that people are willing to gather. It's been a challenge. We've gone all online with things like this, with our cultural stories, and done 2 celebrations online also.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share? You mentioned that you discovered your heritage, your genetic heritage through, did you do like an ancestry or a DNA, one of those DNA tests?
I did. I got for Christmas a couple years ago, is it called 23andMe? 23andMe, it's like a cultural DNA test. And so I actually am not connected with my father's side of the family. And so I was hoping that I would get this, all my cousins and people would show up on there. I actually found a first cousin that I had never met before because there's like a website you can go to. And he's on my mother's side. And my mother passed away she was murdered actually when I was 7 years old. And so I never got a chance to really know my mother's, like my grandmother, maternal grandmother and stuff. And so I was able to connect with a couple of cousins through there. But it was eye-opening because I just knew, listen, I wake up this way. So I knew I was Black, right? And that's all I really had to go off of. And I wanted to find out where my lineage came from. They also give you the opportunity to talk about your health. I think understanding those traits and all of that is important. And so it was a really great experience to be able to get a little bit more in depth about who I am and where I come from. And I also have like 2% Asian as well. And, and it just was like, wow, that's really, I just would have never thought that. Then there's some, like 0.6 European in there. And so I was fascinated. And I actually was very grateful that my sister provided that to me for Christmas. So
yeah, I've heard the 23andMe. Is that what it is? I did Ancestry again as a Christmas thing or Thanksgiving, and it basically told me what I already knew, but it was interesting to see the things that came out, and I completely, like, how I look completely fits my heritages. I'm like almost completely English, Scottish, Irish, that whole area, and then something down in more Central Europe. It was fascinating, which is basically what I'd been told. But where is that part of Africa that you're
Nigeria? So mostly in Nigeria. That's the heaviest. It was in Nigeria. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any interest in traveling there?
I do. So I just went over to Egypt a few years ago, like right before the pandemic. I went over to Egypt and I felt like it was an experience. You go on this vacation and again, I'm a fluke person. So someone's like, hey, you want to go to Egypt? And it didn't register until I was about, 4 days into this 3-week trip. And I was on the Sahara Desert on a camel, and behind me were the pyramids. And I said, Zenovia, you are in Egypt. You are in the motherland. And so just experience that and take that in. And in their culture, religion is really important. And so there would be times we would be riding. When I was in Egypt, I took buses, cars, donkeys, tractors. Like my travel style is like, I'm going to do it. And so I had all these different experiences, but I remember we were in a horse and carriage and we were riding over to the market, and the driver stopped to pray. And I just thought that was so profound that he wasn't concerned with how I was going to feel about it, or, and I didn't feel anyway. I was actually very moved by it, but they pray and somehow it's over the loudspeakers. So you could always hear praying, and people are stopping and having moments and sharing food. And it just was like, it was I said, when I returned home, I felt like there was like a rod that went from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. I felt the most grounded, Nancy, that I ever did on a vacation. It was, it's going to sound like a stretch, but it was life-changing. I enjoyed it so much, and I grew when I was there, and I wrote my book while I was there inside of the different temples and churches. I would just find a place and write for no reason at all, other than I felt like I was at peace. And it was great. It was great. So yes, I plan to travel to the places where my ancestry has shown up, and I plan to connect with people that have that same ancestry.
Yeah, fabulous. I took 2 trips to Jamaica. Once with a friend, and then the second time the people I was supposed to travel with canceled, and I actually went on my own.
Good for you.
Myself. And I stayed up in the Blue Hills with some friends that I had met the first time I was there. And it was a life-changing experience for me, because it made me really appreciate what we have here in our country. We are so rich. We are so fortunate here. Yeah. And to see how people lived there, it was just a whole other experience. So different, but so wonderful, and had a feel that we don't have here. Yeah, because we don't look at those things. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I rode buses, which was interesting. I was in places where I was the only white face, which frankly I loved, because it really put me in an immersed situation that initially I was not thinking was going to be what would happen, but I was brave. And I haven't worn a watch since I was there. I wore a timepiece, because I realized how important it is to just experience life. I pay attention. I look at my phone for my watch. I do check the time, of course. I run by a calendar. But it was a great experience for me. And to be the minority, I found that quite refreshing, and it gave me, I don't live in that normally. So it gave me a perspective. It gave me an opportunity for a perspective that I did not previously have. And I loved that part of it.
Well, good for you for going by yourself and having that experience.
Great.
And, you know, I still go to the movies by myself, right? And tell my husband, oh, I'm just going to go out. And I just go to the movies and go have dinner. So I believe that there's a lot of self-reflection that happens when you are alone. And if I have time, if you could give me grace, because you talked about this country being so rich and everything that we have, and we just see things differently. There was a moment where the kids go to school in shifts for whatever reason, and the kids were walking to school and it was late at night. And I thought, I would not let my daughter walk to school at night, but it just is a different culture. They felt safe. They looked safe. And I was so envious of that they just live in this world where, you know, our kids can roam at night and no one's going to do anything or say anything. And for whatever reason, that stuck out to me, that it just caught me. It was like, wow, seeing, you know, little third graders, fourth graders walking to school with backpacks on, and it's dark outside and no one, it was normal. And here, I think it would just be, if I saw a group of kids walking somewhere with backpacks at 7 p.m., let alone 8 o'clock at night, I would be concerned. I probably would pull over and say, where are your parents? So.
Exactly. You mentioned that you wrote a book. I did not know this about you.
Yes, I wrote in a compilation book. So it was a book of stories of women that just share their experience of tragedy and how they overcame that tragedy. So long story short, my mother was murdered and shot and killed in front of me at the age of 7. And so I was traumatized from that experience. And I thought it was really interesting that I have a lot of brothers and sisters, and we all experienced that, but we all actually turned out quite different. And that experience shifted our lives. And so talking about the road that I chose because of that tragedy versus someone else. And so it was really just a precursor for me to write my own book and tell my own story, but it really is just a story of survival. And it's a story about love. And if you grow up, and again, bias and all these things are built on how you grew up. And I just grew up in a household where love looked different to me than the average family. And what happens is, because that's my idea of love, I went out into the world as a young woman searching for that love from men, a man in particular, but from men that I really wanted from my father and needed from my father. And it put me in positions that I probably shouldn't have been in. And I made decisions and compromised who I was as a woman, as a person, because it looked like love to me, because that's what I thought love looked like. And so I just kind of tell that story of your upbringing is important, but you do have the power to change that. And it's not supposed to be a negative thing. That whole thing of, you know, God won't give you more than you can handle is real. And you're supposed to take those experiences and help other people. You didn't go through that for nothing. So it's a quick little compilation, nothing big. I will have a book someday, but I've got to, you know, stop working to be able to do that. Or go back to Egypt.
Did you publish the book?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on, you can order it directly from me. It is She Believed. It's She Believed. I believe I'm in volume 2, if I'm not mistaken. But again, on this, I can post a link and give you the information.
Yeah, post a link on the Facebook page that this is live streaming to. I would love for people to be able to see that. You know, increase your book sales. Why not?
Why not? Yeah, why not? It was just one of those things. It was kind of like therapy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I'm not in it for the money, but the therapy of writing things and saying things that I had never said out loud before, that you kind of just tell yourself, it was very therapeutic. So any form of writing is therapeutic, even if you don't publish it. Once you say it out loud, it's real, and you can move on from it or embrace it.
True.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, please do post that in the comments for this. That would be great. And Zenovia, thank you so much for joining us today. I learned some new things about you today. I thought I knew a lot about you, but there's plenty more to learn, I can tell.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. Great job on pivoting and making sure that people that want to experience different cultures can still do that. I am so, there's a lot of bad things that came out of COVID, but one thing is folks have access to information like never before, and people are putting things on the internet that are healthy, that are important, and that need to be heard and seen. And so I appreciate you and the International Festival for doing that.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And we will have to have you come back again sometime. That would be great.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you, Zenovia.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Zenovia Harris. She is a very dynamic, energetic woman and wonderful to speak with, and I have the pleasure of knowing her through the Kent Chamber. The Kent International Festival is a member of the Kent Chamber. So this is going to conclude our cultural stories for today. And I just want to also make a mention at the end that our sponsor is Humanities Washington. They're our sponsor for cultural series from now all the way through till we have hopefully our festival in person next June. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you'll join us again for Cultural Stories.